Alright, big yawn, been a big training week.
My name is Bailey O'Brien. I run Bayfit here. This is our gym. I run my girlfriend or my fiance, Maddie, and I am a somewhat of a professional CrossFit athlete. We are just using our platform to tell a little bit about my story about my athletic journey as we prep for Torian 2.0. So I started doing functional type of training. It would have been back in like 2019 when I first introduced this kind of high intensity training. I'd never really done it before. I was more like bodybuilding style of training, never had a personal trainer or a coach or anything like that. So I was always in the gym trying to stay fit, but it was often for like sporting prowess, and whether it be basketball or AFL. And then I got introduced by a couple of friends in probably 2019, 2020. And then I really started like playing around with CrossFit in lockdown and trying to teach myself like weightlifting and gymnastics movements because I had a little bit more spare time. And then from there, it's kind of snowballed into what it is now, being my main passion and hobby. My business is almost centered around it. And this is like my 4th year of doing competitive CrossFit. I did my first ever open in 2021. I kind of surprised myself and qualified for quarterfinals. I didn't really know how the whole process worked. It was still kind of new to CrossFit in general. But I remember I had a triathlon booked on the same weekend as quarterfinals in 2021. I had to cancel the triathlon because I'd made quarterfinals. But that's how much I didn't really have any expectations. I was just kind of doing my first open to have a bit of fun. It turned out okay. I then did the quarterfinals and I came, I think, like in the top 150. I think it was 130 something in all of Oceania. And so I was like, oh, like that was the first time I kind of thought that maybe I had some potential in the sport and had some, ability. I'd worked pretty hard, even though that was my first tournament. I'd worked for the 6 months leading up to it, really training pretty hard to try and learn as much as I can. But at that point, I kind of like really developed the hunger to try and be successful in the sport. I kind of made a 3-year plan that from that 130, the next year I wanted to try and qualify in the top 100, and then hopefully the year after that, the top 50, and then hopefully crack into the top 30 and qualify for the semi-finals for the first time in 3 years' time. The next year I qualified in 39th after the quarterfinals, which was crazy. I kind of skipped the 100, skipped the 50, went straight to 39. And it's funny that although I was super excited and happy, I kind of was also like disappointed that I was so close to making the 30 but didn't quite make it, which is just silly considering I skipped 2 years worth of progress. So I qualified in 39th that year, and there was a lot of people who either pulled out because of injury or going team or whatever. I'm not sure the reasons, but I'm pretty sure after that there was almost 7 or 8 people who got backfill spots. So the 37th person or 38th person, I think, ended up going in the top 30, and I think I was like next in line or maybe the second in line to go. And in hindsight, it would have been cool to go, but I'm glad I didn't go that first year or that second year of my journey, because I just like didn't know anything still. I was still such a rookie, and I'm glad that I had another 12 months to work on my craft and keep getting better and become a more well-rounded athlete before I made my debut.
Probably from when he came 39th that year, I realized he did have the potential to make it to the semi-final level, and that's when I realized, okay, like for him to get to this next stage, he needs someone supporting him and being a part of the journey and helping every single one of his decisions feel like I support them and back them and want that for him as well. And I guess leading into that quarterfinals period, it was a really intense period within the gym, and everyone, because we knew very clearly that it was his turn to make Torian, and that was the goal, and it just did create this pressure. And the open, we were so fixated on the leaderboard, where is he sitting, okay, and like should we redo workouts because it's about where he's sitting. It was just so much pressure on the leaderboard and the position and what's everyone else doing, what program are they doing. I think that like in that period, Bailey and I like would have looked in the back end of like 10 plus different programs to try and make sure we knew what every other athlete was doing and are we doing enough? And that's when Bailey was programming for himself and taking a significant mental load of making sure he was covering all of his bases. So it was just like such an intense period. But anyway, then we get to that quarterfinals weekend, and I remember Bailey's first 2 workouts went so well, and we were so happy and so proud and so excited because again, like we wake up the next morning, we're refreshing the leaderboard and we see that he's in a qualifying position. And then later that morning, I get the email that says that he received the major penalty. And again, I've learned too in this process that like so many things, like we should not have looked at the leaderboard at all for the whole season, but I was fixated too and straight away told him. So then that afternoon, like I can find a video, I'm sure, of how quiet it was in the gym, because from that point we knew that he was backing up against a corner and he was going to have to fight to get back into that qualifying position.
I feel like it was a very stressful environment for him. I remember in the clean and jerk workout, I think he missed the first clean and jerk, and that, like for me myself, if I miss the first clean and jerk in the workout, I feel like my whole workout's thrown off. But then he went home and he came back and did it in the night time. But yeah, very stressed out and I felt so tense watching him because I knew like he was struggling a bit in terms of health and feeling, and yeah, I was just quite tense, and yeah, I just didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Mess it up. So
I think that a lot of athletes wouldn't have the resilience to come back from something like that pushes them outside, but he was able to push back and still finish the workouts in a position. And then we were waiting for the leaderboard, and it actually happened that the morning that the leaderboard was released, he was actually in 31st, so he was 1 spot out, but as the penalties came through was when he pushed his way back up into 24th. So that was the qualifying story, I guess, from my end of making this first Torian.
So yeah, 24th, and then qualified for my first Torian Pro, 2023. But it got to the point where I was like, oh, like next year I should make it kind of thing, instead of just like hoping that I could keep improving. The margin for error gets smaller and smaller the closer you get to the top, and like jumping 9 spots to 30th. When you compare it to going from 130th to 39th, that's a huge jump, but like the jumps higher up the leaderboard are like much harder to make. And I had outwardly said that was my goal. It was in the universe. I kind of put it out there, and it was like, yeah, felt a bit of pressure to qualify the next year. And yeah, just like anything, there was lots of pressure around that quarterfinals weekend. It was going well. I got the major penalty halfway through the weekend, so that was like, I'd almost rather it happen at the end, because I got it on the Saturday morning after I'd already done a bunch of workouts, and it kind of like really stressed out the rest of the weekend, and made me redo workouts, just like, yeah, out of panic that I wasn't going to make it. Anyway, we ended up sneaking in 24th, but yeah, there was definitely more pressure attached to the beginning of last year, because it was like that was going to be my debut year. I was almost set that it was going to happen, and yeah, so I ended up qualifying, which was good, and I kind of carried that stress all the way through for a number of reasons, all the way to the Torian Pro.
And then the prep, I actually felt like was fun, because a little bit of the fact that he qualified was a celebration, and he was able to bring so many people else along for the journey, and that was a really, really amazing part. And the energy in the gym, everyone was so excited.
Super awesome, because I got a taste of what it takes to be at the top level, which took a lot. I was absolutely wrecked every single day, but I felt like he held me accountable, so I had to help him and support him and push him, because that's the goal he wanted to do. And as any good friend for your friends, you want to support them and push them as much as you can. And yeah, just again, that whole process of like, when you think you can't do any more, you always can do more, and just push beyond your limits of your mental capacity. If you can keep going, just keep going. For him, again, I saw like that element of professionalism, like workout planning, strategic planning, trialing different methods out, like trying different strategies here and there. So he hit the workouts like 3 times, and then he tried different method. He chose the best method from the trialing period. But yeah, it was a lot of long days, a lot of long weekends. The body was very sore. I was absolutely mentally and physically fatigued, but you just got to keep pushing, and it was just a good taste to be in that Torian prep, which was cool.
But then the closer it got, the more this pressure was building, and I could just feel that he was really anxious, really nervous, and started to just become, again, really fixated on the events and everything. It was just a very nerve-wracking period.
Yeah, so along with the stress of like all the pressure of feeling like I kind of had to make it, which again, not complaining about the pressure, it just was like an added element there, and pressure is a privilege, and I'm grateful to be in that position. But there was also a lot of, I had injuries, which everyone has, but they were just kind of like really, although I felt this need and this pressure to qualify, and I felt like I wasn't performing at my best or my potential, what I was capable of, was quite frustrating. And yeah, it was just hard to know that I was going to put myself on the big stage for the first time and have however many thousand people kind of watching you, and not feeling like you're at your best was like a tough feeling, and made me kind of quite anxious and like insecure. But yeah, it was, and it made the tournament kind of like more overwhelming and stressful and anxiety provoking than enjoyable. And I think it was always going to be like that for the first time anyway. But I think the fact that there was injuries attached to it that would weigh me down so heavily was like, just kind of compiled into this big, it just seemed like big, more, I don't know, it just was bigger than what it should have been. Being an individual, I didn't play any individual sports growing up. Although like cricket as a young person, you kind of like, you're your own batter, your own bowler. You're kind of somewhat an individual, but like, basketball, which was my main sport, that's like, you got a team of 10. But yeah, so I never really had this spotlight just on me. And not that there is like the spotlight just on you when you're like on the competition floor. There's like, you're in a heat of 8 or there's 30 athletes who are all competing. But yeah, you kind of, the reason I was like drawn to CrossFit in the first place is because you are directly in control of your results based off how much work you put in. Like, you want to work harder, you will get better results. And I love that. I was always a hard worker. I always was never naturally the most talented. Being basketball, I wasn't very tall, I wasn't very athletic. Like, I had to work on everything to get to where I wanted to go. And the concept of CrossFit just really appealed to me. There was no coaches who dictated playing time. There was no referees who dictated how many fouls you got, whether you sat on the bench. It was like, if I want to compete, I can compete. And if I want to do well, then I've got to put in the work. And that was amazing. I love that. But also the flip side of that is, what if it doesn't go your way? Then it's like that pill to swallow. Did you not put in enough work? You're not following the right program? Are you not smart enough to do your own programming? Whatever it is, that's where it can be somewhat stressful when things don't go exactly the way you want them to.
And then in Torian, again, it's so funny that downstairs, most athletes have a coach or a team or a few other people that they know who are helping them. And it was Bailey and myself, and whilst I love to coach here at BayFit, I know that I am not on the semi-finals level of coaching, so I was more just his mental support and doing everything that I could to help him in that aspect, but I was not in any way helping him in terms of coaching. It was still fun and it was an experience, but after every single event I just could feel his energy dropping further and further because he just knew that it wasn't the experience I guess that we'd hyped it up to have been. And there was lots of little things that I guess we went in with these rose-colored glasses of, we were used to basketball lockers and change rooms in that before events you're hyping everyone up and you go out on the floor absolutely ready to play. But when it's an individual sport, neither of us had any experience and it was just cold. I don't know how else to describe it. With all these other factors, it just felt very different and we weren't ready for it. And then again, not to mention that the workouts were so difficult and that the warm-ups, it's not you're so excited to run out on the floor and perform when you're doing a ruck ring muscle up. And the ruck ring muscle up is one that I really think about because beforehand he hadn't used the ruck before, and he wasn't able to do the ring muscle ups in the outdoor area. And he came up to me and he said, I don't know how to do these. I don't know if I can do it. And I was don't worry, it's not that heavy. And I actually put the backpack on myself and I was running around the warm-up area saying, see, it's not that heavy, it's kind of light. But again, it just says that we just didn't have a team around us to help us enjoy that experience. And for me, that was the learning that I took away. from the experience that like we needed to find people around us that could be a part of the journey, that could make him feel confident to perform.
Yeah, so I qualified in 24th and I ended up leaving the tournament in 20th, or like finishing the tournament in 20th. So I kind of like moved up from my ranking. I should have been like, I guess happy that I had improved somewhat. But I just know that I kind of underperformed a little bit. I feel like one, I underperformed because my body wasn't allowing me to do what I wanted to do. But two, I underperformed from like practice to game day. So even though my body wasn't at that level, I still finished workouts with either like a worse time or a less amount of reps or a lower weight than I had done in training, which just like was a bit of a deflating feeling to come away. But again, I learned that now through experience, that like although I thought like adrenaline on the day would take me to do things that I even better, like better weights, better times, it actually was like a huge learning experience about learning how to manage those emotions and understand that it's probably not going to go as well on game day as it will in practice because of the heightened emotions of everything, and having competitors by your side. When you're just doing it in your gym, you can just stay in your own lane and focus on you, but sometimes you get caught up in the rat race and do things you wouldn't always do. But yeah, so that was like there was so many learnings from last year, but I ended up leaving the tournament feeling like, a little bit like, deflated, that I kind of like let myself down a little bit and didn't perform the way I thought I could.
I felt like, again, he didn't feel like he was probably at his peak health and fitness, but he did look really fit. I reckon he handled himself incredibly well. He gave it all he had, which was really gun. I feel like it was important for him to have like a strong network of people surrounding him and supporting him to be able to push for that next level, but I think he handled it incredibly well. I guess like it was his first time on the big stage, so it can be daunting, but I reckon he sort of thrives off that pressure, and that's where he performs his best.
Yeah, so after Torian, I was like, I needed some time off. Mentally, I was very drained from that whole experience, and then physically, my body just needed some serious time. And I'd gotten a lot of like cortisone injections and PRP injections in the lead up to Torian to try and fix the little niggles I had going on. And I just was like, I kind of made the rule to myself after that I don't want to be like just getting by or like using these cortisones to kind of like mask an injury and suppress it just so I can keep going for the short amount of time. That was very much a short-term solution to get me through to the pro. And I wanted to get myself and my body to a point that was healthy enough and I could build a strong foundation that I could then use that as a platform to build across the next 5 years. And so that was my number one priority. I struggled to do that because there's a few things going on in my body which like even we still don't understand just now, and it's taken a few people, it's taken a number of professionals to look at it to try and figure out what's going on. And although different people have picked up different things and been super helpful along the way, it's been hard when the answer just hasn't been so clear. So I worked with 5 or 6 different professionals towards the back end of last year to try and solve the issues, and it just wasn't really working. I ended up then having about 3 months off all lower body work completely, thinking that hopefully things will just settle down. And then when I kind of came back to start moving, it was very clear that I just kind of was in the exact same spot as when I left, which is very frustrating. And then I ended up doing a local comp with Marty and Franco, and at the comp there was sports masseuses on site that were just volunteering their time, and one of the guys, Aldrich, was massaging me before an event or after an event, and we kind of got talking, and then he was actually really good, really liked him, but he lived in the Northern Beaches, and I ended up messaging him a few weeks after the comp and said, hey mate, I'd love to see you again. Is there this is what I've got going on, do you think you'd be able to have a look? And he goes, yeah, I could definitely treat you, but it sounds like there's a bit more to it, and I'd for anyone who I feel like is a little bit over my head or I'm not confident in treating, I usually refer them to Nick. And he said Nick's in your area as well, so it means you won't have to travel. Would you be open to seeing him? I said sure. He sent me Nick's contact. I reached out to Nick, and then yeah, I've been working with Nick since then. That was in like December, I think. Yeah, started December. I saw Nick once or twice before Christmas. We went on break, and then came back and been seeing him ever since.
And hopefully this looks like I've got my thumb up his ass.
Yeah, it's good.
They call this technique chocky bum.
Chocky thumb.
Chocky thumb. Yeah, I got a message from Bailey because it was referred to me from a massage therapist, and it just sounded like someone who was at his wit's end really. And when I met him here and Bailey came in, we had a conversation about all the different things that he'd tried and the frustrations he'd been facing. But also it was a bit beyond frustration. It was almost a bit more towards, not defeat, strong word, but almost. And I have a lot of people like that come and see me that are pretty much at their last resort. They don't know who else to see. They're pretty much done. So it just came down to really understanding what the cause is. And as soon as in cases like Bailey's, because Bailey's not alone, it was just a matter of finding the cause, one cause at a time, addressing that, and then it was just breadcrumbs, a trail of different little wins, and that would translate into his training, and mindset changed.
Yeah, when I saw Nick, as I was seeing Nick, I kind of basically told him, hey mate, this is like no pressure, but you're basically my last resort. I feel like I've gotten every type of treatment under the sun. I've got x-rays on my spine, I got CT scans to make sure my leg length discrepancy was the exact same. I got MRIs on MRIs to get as much information to see what the cause was. And yeah, I basically said, hey mate, here's all the information, you can do with what you can. But yeah, I feel like I'm a bit of a lost cause at the moment. And he kind of took it in his stride and was super enthusiastic about wanting to solve the problem, which was just yeah, it was awesome. It was refreshing. It gave me hope for the first time in a while. Instead of just kind of managing, getting by, he kind of told me, no, we will find the problem, the solution. It might take a little bit of time, but we will get there. And it kind of reignited some hope in me, which was great.
I think Bailey and I are also a good fit in that we're both quite problem orientated, and when I'm looking at, I'm definitely not one to spin things in a way where we're going so well, it's more just, okay, we've fixed that problem, what's the next problem, what's the next problem, what's the next problem. And it's not until we got to about Christmas last year that the perspective started to shift. We started to see bits of evidence. We had squat symmetry started to look better, squat numbers started to look better, it started to feel easier. And so the shift after Christmas was far more pragmatic in that we, instead of going from a mindset of I wonder where this is going to work, it's this is going to fucking work, let's hit this. And so we just went harder after Christmas because we had that traction. We had the traction of getting the early wins, and those early wins were enough for some momentum to build. And so really since January, we've just been really accelerating. And I think that it's continued that way, really.
Yeah.
But again, it's my nature, but also Bailey's, to look for the next thing that we need to fix in order to get more progress in training and see that translate. Teaming him up with other good professionals that are going to bridge my weaknesses or like have other strengths that I don't have to help him in other ways that I simply can't. So it's just a matter of not being everything to Bailey, being the person that helps mechanically solve the problems, whilst also getting support in other realms of being an athlete.
There, I then went down to, we go on holidays down to the Mornington Peninsula, and yeah, when we go down there, we often train in the CrossFit gym, which we have been for the last like 5 years, and the gym down there, I started training a girl, Daisy, who's also on the semi-final scene as well. We kind of became mates over the last few years. We both entered and did our first individual comp at Down Under a few years ago, and then we kind of like, yeah, became friends from there. So I trained with her. She was training on Mayhem. I did like a week's worth of training with her and got my ass kicked because I just hadn't been doing definitely no strength stuff because like my body still wasn't able to handle it, and because I wasn't motivated and I was still debating whether I would even compete in 2024. I hadn't been doing much fitness either. So, but I said I like the change of scenery. It was fun training a different gym, so I just like jumped in with whatever she did for a week and got my ass handed to me. But it was kind of the kick up the butt I needed and kind of ignited a fire that like, hey, yes, I do want to be doing this, and this feeling of like not being fit right now is just like killing me, and I want to get back in shape and give myself a chance to try and compete this year, even if it's not at 100%.
I know like Bailey, he took 3 months off, and like it was actually like nice that we did some life things instead. Like we got engaged, we bought a house, like our apartment. So like life filled that gap, but I knew that whilst we were filling it with life, he still wasn't happy because he wasn't able to meet his potential, and he hadn't made the progress like within his body to allow him to feel like he was going to perform. And it was nice that like when he was trying to dip his toe back into a little bit more, like he did some local comps just with like his friends, and like that was really, really fun. And it was so nice to see that him start to get the fire back. He just in these local comps with his friends, and I went, oh, okay, maybe he will want to compete. But he wasn't training at the point that I thought he would. I kept saying, oh, like, so are you thinking you're gonna compete next year? He was like, oh yeah, maybe. And I kept saying, like, I think you need to start training, like you're going to compete. Like, and I was freaking out. I was like, I think he's not left enough time, that like, no matter how healthy he is, like, I don't think he's got enough time to build himself back up to the athlete that he'll need to be to qualify. Like, I was worried about just quarterfinals, let alone anything else.
Joined Mayhem and started speaking with them. They ended up like reaching out and saying, hey, they kind of recognized I started doing their program. They like to sponsor me. They jumped on, or they sponsored me as an athlete for the year, and have been like super helpful in all of my programming and helped me out through each stage. And yeah, I've just had a program to follow. I've been working with Nick, and yeah, I'm in a much better spot than I was this time last year. Although it's still not perfect, I've kind of like shifted my mindset that like everyone's going through things, and things might not ever be perfect, but you've got to do the best you can with what you got.
From our communication over like social media, just without meeting him, he could sense like that I was kind of almost like at a point of desperation, and they're like, hey mate, I've been referred to you, I feel like I've seen every person in Sydney to no avail, I'm hoping you can help me. And so he booked me in on a Saturday as his last client, and we spent 2 hours basically like talking and like addressing everything, as opposed to kind of feeling like at most places getting like, yep, that's your 60 minutes, or that's your 45 minutes, you're up, here's your help fund, or like kind of on your way, and then not really getting any follow-up, or like leaving kind of going, oh, like, where's the direction, where am I going with this, what can I do on my own? Instead it was like, we spent 2 hours just figuring out some groundwork, and then putting very clear procedure in place of where to go from there. And even though it's changed, and it constantly does change, at least like each step of the process has been clear.
I think there's a part here around they're not paying me for my time, like, and even paying is the wrong word. Bailey's not entrusting me or enlisting me with a role in his athletic endeavours. He's not enlisting me with a role so that I can just spend that time with him. He's asking me to be part of his team. He's asking me to help him on his journey. He's asking me to fulfill a particular role that he needs filled inside his team. What is that? Based on time? I mean, that's if you consider people or athletes as a transaction, by all means. But if you look at athletes as actually you're now part of their team, then it doesn't matter how long it takes, you're looking for a result. And then there's going to be easier times and harder times. When there's an injury, busier times. When there's no injury, easier times. So it just comes down to, well, what's your role as a team member of an athlete's camp? And is that dependent on time, or is that dependent on the result? And I'm glad you remember that, Bailey. Yeah.
He references it all the time.
Yeah. First.
And I know that most people just see the highlight reel of the training, and like any athlete that's at Torian level or the games level, they know that like it's hard to express to someone how much they do within a day or within a week to get their bodies to the point that they're at. And like be living with someone who does it, you see it all. And I just think there is no way I could ever do that. Like, and it's like people say they want to be an athlete, but I'm like, my God, until you see what they do in a week, like I don't think anyone would want to do that to themselves unless they have this crazy fire, because it's incredible. And whether that's like Bailey's had like a mobility coach who Kat writes him like hour-long sessions that he does mobility per day, and like that is just like astronomical for people to do that alone, their actual training on top of it. So like all of the hard work, it really has gotten to this point now, and it's exciting to see.
This year, like the first person, I've always had like Maddie in my corner. She's been like the best and has been there from the start. But I think the first person to kind of add to the team was like Nick. Nick was like, a huge part on getting my body right, but also my mind right. So he was always been like my psychologist as well as like a chiropractor at the same time. I then got like the crew of coaches at Bayfit who like have been training with me and doing Mayhem and our Compete crew training each week, which is kind of like another arm of the team that is just like there all year round and doing, I feel like it's kind of with me on the journey. Even though Daisy's from afar, I feel like I've gained like a team member in like working with her, doing the same programming, sharing scores, and it's been fun because we're not on the same leaderboard, so there's no true competitiveness there. Although we'll dig each other and we're trying to beat each other and be competitive, we don't like get self-conscious or worry about it, because we're truly just trying to make each other better, as opposed to being on the same leaderboard and getting self-conscious if one of us beats the other person. So I feel like I've got a really good team around me now, and although I'm still so young in my athletic career in terms of the CrossFit space, I feel like I've learned so many lessons in the past 12 months. I'm excited to try and like capitalize on them this year, but understanding that this year isn't the end goal either, and that like it's just a constant stepping stone to try and improve year on year. But I feel like I've taken some good steps in the right direction. And then once I do figure out the cause of my body and actually crack the code and feel like I can get myself well balanced across both sides, I feel like that's going to be a dangerous period for me where I can really unlock some potential, which is untapped at the moment.